And here we go. Right, well, welcome everyone. Great to see you all. Lovely to have you all with us. And we're back for our March event. Really looking forward to this one. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sathpal Singh. Everybody calls me Sath, and I'm your lead host for this session. I'm joined by my co-organizer and co-host Donald Henderson. You would have waved, Donald. Um, just the usual formalities, really. So we have a very simple code of conduct. At Future Work Scotland, we just ask you to be respectful to one another. Whenever we have a great experience, it's all we ask. Very, very simple, modest aim on our part, and we hope you have a great experience with us for this session. We'll do the usual sort of community shout-outs at the end. So if there's anything that we want to share, we'll do that. And if there's anything that you might want to share with the community, just ping Donald and I a note, and we'll give you the chance to share it, or just drop it into the chat. We'll take questions at the end as we normally do. If stuff comes up along the way, just drop it into the chat. Prefix it with a Q if you can. That makes it easier for us to spot questions because usually people are chatting, so we have to sift through it and dig out the questions, and we'll get them to our speaker. And with that, I'm thrilled and delighted to welcome Stuart Munton to Future Work Scotland. I've got to know Stuart quite well over the last few years because we're both on the sort of Agile and tech sort of speaker circuit, so we've found ourselves at some of the same conferences and enjoyed one another's company between presenting our talks and networking and whatnot. So yeah, great to have Stuart here. Stuart has got tremendous experience. He's been in agile and digital transformations for over 2 decades now. In the day job, he's I can't remember the title, Stuart. He's the group chief operating officer. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong when you start. But and digital, and he was part of the early team when they were a startup, and they've grown to a phenomenal size now. And Stuart's had a huge hand to play in their growth and their continued success. Outside of that, as I mentioned, Stuart's a well-known face on the Agile speaker circuit. I think he's got a few other ones lined up this year. And the talk he's about to give actually is one that I heard him do in Agile Lean Ireland when we were both there in Cork last year. And it's a fantastic talk. Puts a really interesting light on the role Agile can play in how our teams are continuing to evolve and how we might deliver digital product moving forward. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stuart and get us started. So Stuart, over to you. Welcome to Future Work Scotland.
Lovely. Thank you, Saf. Thank you, Donald. Hello to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So there are going to be slides. I'm going to be talking through stuff, but there will be some interactive moments as well during this. So please have phones for Slidos and those things if you want to get involved and kind of tell me your views on it. We will be doing questions at the end. If I say something you want to ask during the thing, I don't mind like talking about it during the middle of it as well. Is that showed? Yes, it did. Good. Right. So this talk is called the Convergence, and it's sort of about how AI is changing ways of working. The specific section of it, because it goes off in a couple of different directions. There's a strategy section, and this bit is more around kind of the team kind of behavioral pieces and team dynamics and how AI is changing those. My introduction, so this is Smiley me. So as Saf says, I've got a fairly complicated job title. Chief for Group Delivery and Technology and Scrum half at And Digital. So what that means is I'm kind of the group CIO some of the time, mainly when people want printers fixed and things like that. That seems to be the reason they call me for that. But I've been involved in digital transformation for 25 years, 15 years ish on the client side and 10, 11 years on consulting side. And so through that's been like how we've grown And Digital from I was officially number 10 as we've kind of grown the organization. What I look after is kind of end-to-end practices at a level and how we kind of work those things. And then the other thing I kind of focus in is closing the digital skills gap, which is kind of the mission of the organization. So that's me. If you want to connect to me on LinkedIn and say hello, that's nice as well. So Um, so that's my introduction. We're gonna, as I said, we're gonna be using Slido during the session. It is to help us to kind of get a view on it. So the first question I'd like you guys to consider, and you'll need your phones to kind of scan this QR code, and there's another one on the next page which actually show the Slido. So I get an idea of who's in the room and where you fit in terms of your kind of AI position and how positive or negative you are. Um, can you answer this question? So what level of AI driven productivity do you expect in the next 6 to 12 months? So if I move on to this, it will open the thing. So it's the same code all the way through. So if you want to participate in it, scan the thing and tell me what you think. We have 3 people voting at the moment, so that's good. 4. It does slightly prejudice you by showing you the answers, obviously, but again, it's the way it is. You can make it so it doesn't do that, but again, at least it gets people to participate. So we've got at 25% at the moment. We've got a little bit more 25. We've got some zeros coming in, which is good, interesting. We don't have any negatives yet. And we don't have any plus 55s. Oh, there's a minus 25. There we go. It's always an interesting sort of idea to kind of work out where this kind of fits and kind of what the kind of group is feeling, experiencing. We've got 13 so far. So current best position is somewhere between 25 and 10% ish. There's a little bit of negative, which is interesting, but we'll talk about that when we get through this. But nobody is super plus 50% kind of. I've seen some of the old school agile folks saying plus 400% in some places. So there's some interesting numbers being bounced around all over the place. So okay, cool. So we're in a sort of oh, we do have plus 50%. Okay, good. So we're in that sort of place, which is fun, and that's good because it kind of helps me to kind of understand kind of where you guys are coming from. Me personally, I'm fairly AI positive. I believe there's lots of interesting stuff that we can do, but also there's some really kind of weird stuff that we have to overcome as well, and we're going to talk through that. Most of the session today is actually going to be kind of talking about kind of people and AI and how people kind of need to think about what they're working on stuff. So the reason this is interesting, the 25% being 50% of you. Some stats which are outside this. So Microsoft did a long study. It was released in the middle of last year. Admittedly, it was Microsoft, and it was Microsoft and Accenture and Microsoft talking about the productivity gain of using Copilot. Okay, so there is a little bit of bias in it, but their study actually studied about 4,800 software engineers, and it was relatively well scientifically run. You can go and look at the paper. There's the link to the paper. You can go and get to the abstract for that. Their positioning was around 26% productivity increase. Almost all of it was focused on engineering and software development metrics because they were putting this in the position from GitHub Copilot. So if half of us thought 25% in the previous survey, that kind of matches with what Microsoft and Accenture got to. Next example. So this was a field study that And Digital did. So we were working with a very large insurance company, which we were doing kind of front-end dev and mobile development. Our measures were different because actually we were doing with a kind of a set of small teams, and we were looking at the kind of productivity across a set of them. And we were looking at kind of a wider set of agile metrics, so some throughput and some cycle time and some developer experience numbers. And so ours kind of mashed up into a slightly different set of numbers, but it came to about 20 to 25% in terms of productivity improvement for that group. Based on what they were doing compared to kind of some control groups. So that's the kind of where the kind of the why we need to talk about this and make sure we're happy about this is it's not 500%, yeah, because I don't think anybody is seeing those things. It's not. There are some obviously negative patterns, which we'll talk through some of the risks later on, but that's the kind of the baseline that we think about when we're working to kind of productivity numbers. And productivity means, just to be clear, it means so many different things to so many different people as well. So if we start from there, what we're going to start to talk about is kind of how AI is changing digital teams. But we're going to go backwards first before we can come forwards. And I'll tell you a kind of short story at the start of it. But you'll notice obviously all the imagery within the talk is AI generated as well. So we have a nice picture of Winston Churchill. Those who fail to learn from history are deemed to repeat it. Yeah. So we need to go look backwards first. And so for those of you who are um, old enough on here to remember kind of traditional waterfall development. So we used to have big upfront deliveries. We used to have loads of documentation. Things were late. They took over budget. We were missing scope. There was all manner of stuff that happened with it. This was the start of my career. So very traditional kind of waterfall software engineering projects. And this is kind of what I was introduced to. And this is how I came into this. And then in about 2003-ish, I kind of wandered into team level agile. And for me, it was a revelation because we ended up with smaller cross-functional teams. We ended up with small batch sizes. We ended up with kind of a set of benefits that we all kind of associate with the kind of the agile shift. And it was good because we were happy. This is when I enjoyed agile as a thing because it was cool, it was new, it was fun. It was really actually providing us with value. Fast forward a wee bit, and then we get to the scaled agile. And I'm not bashing frameworks and any of that kind of stuff, but as agile has grown, we've ended up where we had kind of novel, interesting teams doing novel, interesting stuff, moving fast and innovating as they went through, to big groups with large batch sizes, coordination roles which are coming through. We've ended up with this kind of homogenized kind of view of multi-team positions. And in my view, kind of the value that we were getting from kind of an older agile and an earlier agile has been reduced. So things are slowing down. We've got large batches and lots of people doing stuff and lots of frameworks and lots of organization. And so the position I want to kind of put to you guys is this is kind of where we've got to with the kind of the agile space and agile delivery. We're still making things and doing stuff. There is still some novel stuff, but I find that actually the AI side is kind of where I'm interested now because it brings my mind back to where we were. So when I was introduced to Agile, it was about moving faster, smaller teams. And in my view, and I'm going to talk through kind of how we get to that kind of point of view, AI team delivery, so AI augmented teams, the teams are going to get smaller. The batch size is going to decrease. The roles are going to converge. So we're kind of going to talk about convergence and what that means. And value is going to be delivered faster. And so my premise is that AI teams will be more agile. Yeah. So what this brings us back to is some of that stuff which made me excited about agile back at the early 2000s. Because that was when it was interesting. That was when it was kind of new and novel. And let's go and do this stuff and kind of work out how we get that stuff done. So I see AI as the kind of the thing which is going to make us more agile, and I'll kind of talk through kind of the pattern for that. So, Sath, are you looking at the chat? I'm not actually looking through if there's any questions that are coming through at the moment.
Yeah, no, we'll monitor that. Don't worry about that. It's just
Okay,
commenting and sharing other good sources,
cool,
etc.
cool.
All good.
So that's the kind of premise. And so that's what we're going to work through. So we're going to work through it at a couple of different levels. The first one is at an individual level because until it's not, the one common thing about our systems is they've got people in them, and those people are individuals. And so that's where we're going to start with this, and then we're going to move into kind of what those individuals look like and what those look like in teams. So from an individual's point of view, we're going to talk through kind of three areas. There's one which is new to this talk as of today. Well, as of yesterday, I wrote it, but it's because we always come up with questions about it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is capabilities, and that's going to be kind of the basis of a lot of what we actually talk about through the talk. There is a piece we're going to talk about capacity and how AI changes that. But there's also a piece which we're going to touch into about characteristics, as in what characteristics does a person probably need. I mean, you could call them behaviors. I've tried various different words, but I tried to go for a kind of alliteration of C's. So we've got capabilities, capacity, and characteristics to talk through. So we're going to talk through some of those, and then we're going to go through some examples. So bear with me as I go through the kind of model a bit. So from a capability point of view, what I mean by this is we have individuals. Those individuals have competencies and skills. They may be domain specific. So in our model, which I'll kind of go through in a little bit. So this is the one, the competency and capability model that and Digital uses. Obviously, all organizations will have different ones. Ours is based around 6 main domains. So delivery, product, experience design, data, software engineering, and platform engineering. The thought being that an individual can have competencies and skills across many of those. So some people might be very, very good at product and design. Some people may be really good at software engineering and data, et cetera, et cetera. And some people may be kind of polymath across a lot of these things. So the capability kind of model is the first thing. So these are domain specific. The reason we define them in the way that we do is it allows them to be measurable and shared. So we can say, actually, me as an individual, I do this, I'm good at that, I'm less good at that, I want to develop these things. And so this is a kind of skills concept, competencies concept, but in terms of the capabilities. So the capabilities themselves, again, they're really small on the last slide. They're quite small on this slide. I'm not going to go through them, but these are the sorts of things. So from a delivery point of view, there's some kind of agile and lean stuff, and there's some product stuff around data-informed decisions, and experience design is around information architecture and service design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the intent of this is to go, actually, these are things which one can define, and therefore, if you can define them, you can have a second level conversation about them. Say, actually, I'm quite good at DevOps, and this is why I'm good at DevOps, because I'm good at this thing. I can do these things, and this is the thing I want to improve on. And so there's a set of kind of capabilities and competencies that kind of come with this. And so the intent of this is actually in the model to go, actually, these are the things one can think about. Obviously, with all organizations being different, the things that will be in this model will be different for your organizations, whatever you want to put in it. It just allows you to kind of have a second level conversation to say, actually, these are the things which are important to us. That's what that means. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that and let's actually improve around it. And I'll talk about kind of how AI comes into that first. So that's the first piece. The next piece is then about capacity. And so if I'm thinking about my competencies and thinking about what those are to deliver, and the things I might be able to do and how I might be able to do them, the capacity side of this is to think about how much of this I can do. And capacity is different at each different delivery stage. So as I work through, if you look at a kind of traditional Scrum team as an example, you probably wouldn't have a Scrum team full of 10 product owners, because that wouldn't make any sense, because actually in the model you'd have a product owner and a Scrum Master and a few software engineers and a few testers and maybe a DevOps person and maybe a designer. So by this kind of capacity, I mean actually the capacity of the work matches in terms of those teams to the number of humans are in it. So if you've got five of your 10 people are software engineers within your software engineering Scrum team, they take up 50% of the capacity. And so there's a different capacity for the different kind of skills that go through that. Some pieces of capacity are industry specific. So knowing how insurance industries work is important. Yeah, so you can actually do more stuff. But some capacity concepts are cross-cutting. So actually knowing how loyalty works may apply in different domains and different industries. So there's lots of kind of different kind of concepts of capacity. And there's also kind of an important point to note, there's lots of different sources of capacity. And I'm going to make the kind of conversation today around the source of capacity being humans and AI. So actually, how do we kind of look at how AI improves our capacity as well as our competency, as well as what we need to kind of think about in kind of team dynamics. And so we've got a competency piece. We have a capacity piece, and so there's a lot of kind of different kind of mixes things. And I do promise you I will get on to an example to kind of show you what this looks like in a minute. But this is to try and make us kind of think about what we may experience as an individual, and therefore what we can then do as we kind of move into teams. As I said, the characteristics things was something which was added over the last kind of week for this, because we always have a conversation about this, which is, okay, fine, these people have different competencies, they have different capacities. what would you say need to be the kind of characteristics of an individual who works well within an AI environment? So there's a few. Again, more alliteration. It's kind of forced alliteration sometimes. We look at people who want to evaluate things. So you evaluate the value of the thing that you do. One of the challenges with AI is it generates things very quickly. You may not understand the value of it, you may not understand what it is, but because you've got it and you used to take 6 weeks to make that thing, you then have higher value of it. And so therefore your ability to evaluate things and have critical thinking of actually is it any good is important. So this is a kind of characteristic for this. We want people who can empathize and have collaborative thinking. So we want people who can work with people and empathize with individuals, because actually if you are abstracting, as we get to the kind of model and how this changes, if you're abstracting skills into technology, then actually humans need to do human things with humans. So empathy, collaborative thinking, helping people to work together. And then the final one of the kind of three characteristics, and obviously there's many more you could come up, but I like threes at the moment, is emergent thinking. So it's making sure that the next thing that comes along that you are open to and you will understand and you will learn. And there's a kind of learning part to it, but there's also a creative thinking piece to it. So humans who can evaluate, empathize, and be able to deal with emergent thinking are important within the AI space. So you can have the best AI enabled individuals, but actually if they can't really evaluate things and they can't empathize with people and they actually can't deal with new things that emerge, they're also actually going to have a challenge for the next version of themselves. So we've got a whole kind of set of kind of things that come together in this. The question I want to ask you guys, so if this is what we're talking about in terms of competencies and characteristics and capacity, the next slider for you guys is what would you guys expect to see at an individual change level in the next 6 to 12 months? So what would you think is going to be next in terms of the AI space in front of us? So same thing as before. If you click on a slider, this will generate a word cloud. So as we kind of add people in and people kind of type stuff in. So it could be anything. So again, we've talked a lot about kind of different skills and competencies and stuff so far, but what do you guys think AI is going to change in terms of individual work, individual abilities? What do you think? Forward of your typing, complex systems, okay, scripting, excellent. And if you've written one, you can write more as well. So actually, I'm just curious to see kind of what everyone thinks is the thing which is going to change. Cool, pipelines, yeah, excellent. CI/CD. Presentation, learning new skills, outsource low-value work, getting bombarded with automated job applications. Excellent. AI-assisted coding, research. Excellent. So what we're talking about here is lots of different kind of perspectives on where we think AI is going to change us. Faster delivery, coding assistance. So for me, there's a couple of different kind of stages where we get to kind of using AI. I use AI for a lot of research. Specifically, I'm using Gemini's deep research model mostly at the moment because we're a Google shop and Gemini is embedded into us now. But deep research is really interesting. So I got it to do some competitor analysis the other day, and it went in 15 minutes, looked through 527 websites, which I couldn't have done. Yeah, I couldn't have done in that time. It does then kind of boil it up to vanilla, but again it also kind of made me kind of think about find some stuff which I wouldn't have thought about. The coding assistant things, the research piece, so the research is getting me like the job applications one's really interesting on here because I was in a discussion the other day where people are generating applications using AI, and on the other end, they're receiving them using AI, and they're assessing them in that sense, and therefore, it's just gonna become like an AI arms race of how much AI-ness you can throw into the thing that you're putting in to hit all the right words, so that the endpoint kind of catches up. So. Um, there's lots of stuff that's changing. Yeah, so there's lots of things that we are working through. Lots of kind of stuff on here is around kind of software engineering, which is cool, but also some of our research, presentations, and learning, because these are some of the places where I think AI is going to kind of give us a lot of benefit. Okay, cool. So let's have a think about the kind of process we're going to get that one might go through to evolve your as an individual with AI. So as I said, like from previous kind of slides, the first thing you need to do is understand your current state. So using a common model, as I said, like we have a kind of set of competency models, most organizations do. One of the things I'm thinking about doing is actually kind of sort of building a mirrorverse version of our model so that we can kind of share it out, because it would be useful to kind of use and things. Understanding where you are in terms of competencies and skills, understanding the capacity and experience you have, but also making sure that you are respecting existing crafts. Quite a lot of the hype in this space at the moment comes from people not respecting crafts, people not understanding that individuals have got to where they are through decades of experience, and making sort of sweeping statements that AI will do that, which isn't a respect for craft. And so there's a challenge in that. There was also the other interesting side of this, where when we're looking at junior senior pairs as an example, like what used to happen is the senior would spend a lot more time kind of coaching and doing that kind of stuff, but they may actually, because of their craft, they may be slightly more resistive to some of the new tooling, and so therefore the junior senior pairs are working interestingly in terms of the juniors introducing new tooling, and the seniors reminding people of kind of pattern and structure. And so there's a lot of interesting kind of sort of dynamics in the kind of where people have come from. So first off, kind of remind us of our current state. Next thing to think about, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like we all think we're better than we are, better than average. Like everyone thinks they're a better than average driver, as an example, where we can't obviously be mathematically. I mean, like you see some of this kind of nonsense coming out of geopolitics at the moment as well. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is important. We need to know that we don't know, and therefore we know that we're actually going to get better, and therefore we have a cognitive bias with this. So it's useful to know. But as Aristotle says, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So in the previous talk, someone noticed that my AI generated Aristotle looks a bit like Mel Gibson. So that's obviously what Gemini thinks he looks like. So we know ourselves, and we start to kind of define ourselves. And then once we've got to that point, we then need to think about how we're going to consider AI augmentation. And whether it's an agent, whether it's a service, whatever, the language is still changing and evolving. We talk about agents a lot, but what we want to think about first, like so once we've know who we are, we want to think about what we might be able to augment. So we may want to augment the current competencies that we've got. So we want to enhance those competencies and enhance those skills. We may want to increase our capacity and kind of bridge into different experiences. And the actual answer seems to be a mix of both. So people who are more experienced are looking to increase capacity more. People who are less experienced are looking to increase competency more. So if you don't know what you don't know, you come to it from a competency point of view. But if you already know how to do it, actually AI is increasing capacity by offloading kind of more tasks into automation. And we've also had automation for years of different types. So I was talking to someone about RPA in a meeting this morning. So we've had automation, but it seems to be more coming back to the fore in terms of lots of automation in terms of capacity. So we're going to augment with agents in around that. And then we're going to think about the adjacent possibles. So this is a kind of topic which seems to come up around, but thinking about the things which are next to the things that we know. And if we are able to evaluate the thing that we know, then actually the thing that's next to the thing we know, we're probably better off being able to evaluate that. And so the adjacent possibles allows us to kind of think about what we may want to learn. And so we're augmenting our current, and then we're looking at what's next to where we are. So we may want to onboard adjacent AI agents. So if, as an example, if I'm really good at product, I may be wanting to look at kind of how AI works in design, because there's an adjacency in terms of our model, in terms of how that works. Think about how you are starting to do pair learning with AI. The challenge quite often is you ask AI to solve your problem. It doesn't teach you how to solve the problem. So there's a difference in terms of how you work with the AI agent and how you're augmenting yourselves. If all you're doing is asking it to solve the problem, you will never learn how to do the problem with yourself. And so therefore, there is a nice pair learning kind of pattern that seems to be evolving in terms of working with AI. Yeah, the final kind of piece in this step is think about starting wide and then going deeper. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of services you can use. Everybody will have their own preference. I've put in some examples in the next couple of slides, which we'll talk through, but there are hundreds and hundreds of examples. There is going to be a coming together of lots of those products as well. At the moment, it's a bit Wild West because everybody is kind of wrapping other models. But again, I'm fairly strongly believe that the hyperscalers are going to pull all of that stuff back together again at some point. There is the interesting kind of shift into small language models as well, but we're not going to kind of cut into that. But so from an AI point of view, generally start wider, then go deeper. And then where next? So think about kind of the next adjacent possible. So what could you do? What might you want to think about in terms of competency or capacity that you might want to increase? So they're kind of like a step-by-step kind of process to kind of work through this. Obviously, everyone's process will be different. Everybody's experience is different, so therefore where you're coming from is going to be different. But what I'm going to do now is kind of walk through a couple of examples to kind of helpfully bring this to life at an individual level. So we come back to this nice model. Again, models are useful. And so if we take as an example this one, so this I'll walk through a couple of these. We have a product manager, and this product manager goes through the first step. They define what they're quite good at. The way this is just notional. I'm just kind of using it as an example. So this product manager is good at product skills. They have looked through and they've assessed themselves against a competency model. They've done whatever they need to do within the structure to say, actually, I'm quite good at those things. So they define their current. So this individual is good at products and they're quite good at delivery. Next thing for them to do is to then think about what they might augment their existing. So as an example for this person, they're using Gemini as a desktop AI, but actually they may use Miro, and Miro's AI is a good example of how you can use more AI positioning within tooling to kind of augment what you're doing in product. And so this as an individual is starting to become more augmented. So they are a bit better at product because they can actually probably increase capacity because they're using Miro to do things and automate things. They're using Gemini at a desktop level, so therefore they're increasing productivity. So they're kind of an augmenting the existing. Then get to augmenting the adjacent. So this person may actually go, cool, actually I'm kind of good enough at product type things at the moment. So actually what I want to do now is think about the tooling I may want to use to develop my delivery skills. And so using a framework like Atlassian's Rovo allows you to kind of do this. Obviously, products are different. You may choose different products all the way through, but these are just example ones. Again, I've put a couple of different examples in for different mixes. And then you go, actually, what do I want to do next? Okay, well, I may actually want to use Figma AI to augment my next thing. So as an individual, this person has moved from where they were to actually including a number of different AI products around themselves. So Google Gemini, Miro's AI, Atlassian Rovo, Figma AI. And actually they've improved both capacity and they've improved capability. So there's two different dimensions in which they've kind of extended. I've kind of showed both in the same kind of dynamic in the same chart, just because it's easier to kind of show them in one place. So that's a product person. I'm going to quickly run through a few more just to kind of give some other examples. So delivery manager, good. They're good at delivery, and they're also quite good at some data stuff because obviously they needed to do some stuff. They wanted to augment some pieces, so they use more tooling out there. They may want to augment the adjacent and make sure that actually their data skills increase. So they actually may use Snowflake's Cortex to kind of do some of that. But actually, they may find that actually they want to then write some software. And as an individual, this person might use Cursor because they may actually want to go and write some Python, which is going to help them with their data viz out of Snowflake. And so you can see actually as an individual, we can start to kind of build out some of these spaces. And all of these going to kind of run through the kind of similar process. So an experienced designer is quite good at some things, but they get better. Yeah, they increase their capacity with Figma AI. They may want to get more into product, but then they may want to get more into kind of software engineering. So they may use GitHub Copilot as an example. Generally, what we're finding is the kind of core product at the center starts to disguise, as in like if you are working in a Microsoft environment, you're probably more likely to be using MS Copilot. If you're working in a Google environment, you're more likely to be using Gemini. But the other tooling around the outside sort of starts to get directed by it as well. And there's a lot of kind of similar connected products. Software engineers, obviously good. They're good at software engineering to start with, so that's good. So that's a good thing. You hired the right person. But they're also good at platform engineering. But they may want to automate a load of stuff. So actually using kind of like Cursor in this example, they can expand their capacity. And so they get better at augmenting those things. They may want to use something like Amazon Q or other automation tools in CI/CD to kind of help them kind of work through that. Oh, I need to get rid of that. So moving on. And then they may actually think about, actually, cool, I'm good at software engineering, but actually, what do I need to do now to kind of help myself kind of move into kind of more delivery? Platform architecture, similar. So they're kind of good at platform and data, and then they want to augment that, Snowflake Cortex, and then they may want to augment their software engineering side. But then they may also want to get into kind of more design pieces. So you can see actually that all of these are kind of examples. And individuals are trying to make sure that they're thinking about what am I good at now? What do I need to enhance out of those things? What are the adjacent things that I can think about which can be AI enabled? And then what's the kind of next piece? So the augmented, the next adjacent. So as you can see from how we kind of seeing kind of development of skills, development of competencies, and development of capacity, you're ending up with individuals who are being AI augmented. And so they're growing their competencies, they're growing their capacity as individuals. When you then start to take this into the team models, and from an agile team kind of perspective, it starts to kind of think actually, well, if I've got AI augmented individuals, what does that actually mean to the AI team? So the agile teams of the kind of now and of the future. And so what we're seeing is a convergence around individuals. So an individual who in a current standard, I'm saying standard, but like a standard Scrum team who is a software engineer mainly does software engineering, and they mainly do kind of one thing. But what we're seeing actually with AI is actually a convergence around individuals. So the current and adjacent competencies are increasing. And so we're ending up with kind of this view around teams of humans and AI agents. It's not AI doing all the things. It's actually kind of teams of humans working with a number of different AI agents in small micro teams. And I have tended to threes in most of my examples in this, just because I kind of like threes because it's not a two, it's a three, it's a trio. But it could be a four, it could be a five, it could be like you could be moving from like 100 people who are doing stuff and sort of doing a kind of a big scale thing down to smaller groups of this, and so smaller sets of teams. And so the changes we're seeing is like smaller teams, twos. I mean, you may get to a point of ones. We'll talk about the risk of a one team later on in terms of kind of the loneliness of individuals in some of this. Smaller teams, quicker onboarding and gelling because you're only going to need to get to know a couple of people. You don't need to know lots and lots of people. Just-in-time events and meeting. You're enhancing capacity and you're increasing enhancing capability and you're increasing capacity. So smaller teams moving faster, moving to kind of more ultra lean kind of models of teams. Hopefully you've all seen a diagram that looks a bit like this. So this is Brooks's law. Apparently this was an outrageous simplification, but it captures the general rule. So if I have 3 people, they can talk to 3 people. And whereas if I've got 11 people, there are 55 lines of connection. So this was just a way that I was trying to kind of say, actually, if we've got groups of 3s, then actually we can gel faster, we can connect faster. Each of those 3s is potentially another node, which they're actually connecting in with a set of AI agents at the same time. But this is kind of where the kind of the speed and the ease of this comes into. So we end up with teams which have increased adaptability. They can change direction in minutes, not days. Maybe like we like agile teams being able to move and change direction. Agility is the ability to change direction at speed. So we're doing that in minutes, not days. There's less reliance in the future on team frameworks. At the moment, we would need some frameworks kind of like Scrum, which actually kind of help us to kind of shape things and go, actually that works. But actually, if you've only got 3 people who are AI augmented, do I really need Scrum? Do I really need that kind of long cadence? So there's potentially less reliance on that. We're going to reduce cognitive load and management load. A lot of the cognitive load goes into the tooling. So there's a whole kind of suite of knowledge management, AI kind of pieces that come to this. And the management load reduces as well, because if you've got lots of groups of 3, then how many managers do you need? Yeah, so do you need to manage groups of AI augmented people or not? So the convergent effects lead it to being more agile. Again, to the agile, to the kind of the traditional old agile rather than the massively scaled agile. Yeah, so it's actually being more agile because of the convergent effects driven by AI. So I've been kind of talking for a bit, so I would like you guys to think about what you think will happen to teams driven by AI in the next 6 to 12 months, and then we'll get into some examples of this. So again, it's another word cloud like the last one. So what do you think is going to happen to teams driven by AI in the next 6 to 12 months? As an interesting thing, when I first wrote this thing, we were talking about 3 years, but every time you say multi-years in AI, it just becomes nonsense, because things change from this week to next week, let alone what will happen in the next team. Tiny teams, yep. It seems the way. Increased turnover, interesting. Smaller, cross-functional. The turnover one's going to be interesting. I think we're going to end up with like much more fluidity and people moving more. I mean, and maybe people not liking where they're in. Different approaches to quality assurance. Fail very fast. Okay. Keep on failing in projects. Yes. Smaller. Yeah. And so the direction of travel that we're seeing is to more ultra lean teams. And interestingly, like you can have really effective ultra lean teams without any AI. We've kind of worked with a number of organizations where they've got to that point, but generally what those have needed is really, really good individuals, like super good experienced individuals. Whereas actually I think the interesting shift that we're going to see at the moment is going to be into more people being able to do this, because you'll be able to offload management load and cognitive load into the system. Then you can do some of this. No politics within the team. That'll be an interesting one, be a lovely one. Yeah, I think there'll be a different set of politics that are going to happen at some point, but that's fine. We're going to have holiday. Okay, hopefully, yeah, we can organize. There is an interesting direction of travel for increased productivity, which gets towards maybe more holiday, maybe 4-day weeks. Yeah, so it's actually into a different way of working, and the kind of way we were equating it to is before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have weekends. I mean, obviously, and everyone tells me, and the trade unions. So basically, you need trade unions, and you need productivity increases, and then you end up with weekends. But we may end up with 4-day working weeks. Less conflict, AI tool fatigue. Excellent, good. So what do these actually look like then at a kind of team level? So we kind of looked at them at an individual level. We're going to kind of mash some of these together into kind of teams, just as some examples, because there's a couple of dynamics within the team shaping and knowledge shaping within this, which are worth pointing out. So first off, we've got a team which has got a product person, a data person, and a software person. As I said, I like threes, but you could be fours and fives or twos, whatever. Yeah. So as this process goes, the same process you would apply as an individual, you probably want to apply as a team. So what is my team good at? Yeah. What are the people around me good at? And having that as a measurable, transparent, shareable thing is important. So we are good at those things. These are the skills and competencies and capacity that we have as a group. What do we need to improve? Well, actually, if I go between these two, so actually we're quite good on product, we're quite good on data, we're quite good on software engineering. So for us to be a fully functional team, actually maybe we need a bit of design, a bit of delivery, and a bit of platform architecture. So some skills that kind of come into those. So if in the same way that we may be considering it from an individual competency increase point of view, we may also want to think about this from a team point of view. So how do we kind of bring these things together? So we augment as a team. And look at that, and then we go, okay, well, what's the next thing we might want to do? Actually, we may want to increase our capacity, so we'll push some more automation into Figma AI, or we'll push some more automation into GitHub Copilot. So we get to a point where we're starting to fill the space, because this is the set of skills, competencies, capabilities, capacity that's required to do the work with a mixed team of kind of products, data, and software. So this was a kind of like a place we see quite regularly, and this is kind of where we see teams kind of going at the moment. There are a couple of different other options with this. So you'll notice actually on the model, I probably haven't called this out, the bit at the top of the model, so delivery, product, experience design, is much more in the problem space. And the bit at the bottom of the model, solution architecture, software engineering, and data, is much more in the solution space. It's not that they don't match over, but if you've got a mix of people between the top and the bottom, then you're going to have a slightly more rounded kind of view of problem space, solution space. But if you've only got people who are in platform, software, and data, they're generally going to have skills which are in that space, that kind of that bottom hemisphere of this in terms of a team, and that's where they are good. So the natural pattern for these individuals who are more technical, who are more solutions-based people, is to kind of try to augment into the problem space. So some Atlassian, Rovo, blah blah blah, Miro, Figma stuff. So where might we look at the skills and the competencies and the things we have as an individual? We actually do that as a team, and then we think about how do we augment that. And then a bit more. So we actually may need a bit more software engineering skills within this group. And so therefore the group starts to augment to a point where they start to kind of fill the board a bit more. And one of the direction to travel is going to be like more of kind of the people who were more traditionally doing more of the solution space, more of the technical space, moving more into the problem space, which is a good thing, because actually if you understand the problem space, then you can create the solution space. So if you don't understand the problem space, the solution space you're creating might be the wrong one. So it moves people from the bottom upward. The next model is probably the more contentious one, which is where you've got people who are all from the solution space, so the problem space, trying to augment themselves into the problem space. And I'll explain the kind of the challenge with this one, because these people are good at delivery and product and experience design. They may have a little bit of software engineering knowledge. The challenge they've got is, how do they evaluate the thing that comes out of the system? Yeah, so if they are generating more code using Copilot and Amazon Q's building pipelines and stuff for them, how are they evaluating that? It might work, but how are they actually making sure that it works and understanding it from a kind of quality and a patterns and the standards for being? So there's a different thing in here. Whereas on the previous one, generally the solution space is in a language that these people understand. So it may be written in JavaScript, and therefore they may know JavaScript, and so therefore it's in a language they understand. Whereas the problem space above it is most likely in the same language they speak and write and read, and so therefore there isn't that they can actually understand both sets of the languages. Whereas in this example, these individuals may not really understand how to write Cobalt, but they may actually get Copilot to write it for them. Yeah, and that might just be the thing in it, and it might work, and that might be fine. So they may then continue this, and they may actually make more and more really bad cobalt, and or actually transliterate it into something else. So this one is a slightly harder sell, I think, because you've got people who understand the problem space well, but they're starting to generate solution space artifacts, which I don't think they will be skilled enough to evaluate. And so therefore this introduces an interesting risk in the dynamic of the mix of these teams. So three different examples of teams to kind of work through. I'm going to pause just for a second. Sath, are there any questions about anything we've covered so far in the chat that
There
you want?
was, yeah, Stuart, there was a couple flashed by. Let me just take one out. There was one I saw from Debbie. For folks who don't have much experience of an area, trying to increase their competency in that area isn't that a huge risk that they will learn bad habits, fail to learn important principles? I think they're
Yes.
better at something than they are.
Yes, and that's Dunning-Kruger effect classically,
Mm.
because but also one of the risks we're going to cover in a second is exactly that, where actually generally our pattern of learning has been from learning from people who have experience who have come before us, and learning from them. And there's the apprenticeship model and the journeyman model, which again gets impacted by this, but we'll come on to that in the next risk, which we'll explain that a little bit more as well.
That was the only one I can see. Just
Okay,
other folk
cool.
just chipping in and chatting in the chat. So all good,
That's
all good.
good. I'm just curious if people were questioning stuff. That's fine.
No,
So,
no,
okay.
no.
So we've kind of talked through a kind of model of how individuals can sort of augment themselves and teams may augment themselves. Obviously, every time you talk about AI, you need to consider some risks. I've only put four in here, but they are four which are permeate into everything. So the first one kind of comes back into that first question. So the learning risk. So AI is impacting the apprentice model. And I don't mean apprenticeships like in the UK where there's an apprenticeship levy and you pay people to this. I mean that junior people learn from mids who learn from seniors. And if you augment, automate, remove the work that is done at the lowest level of that, then how do people learn? Yeah, and how do they then go through that journey? And therefore, does it leave us with a future where if we don't have any junior software engineers, or we have junior software engineers who have suddenly become seniors because they're AI augmented, what does it mean? Yeah, and so there's a thing for us to kind of noodle through from that. Obviously there's an impact of reskilling that comes through this, as in like people learning new things, but also the output validation challenge. This is when people are producing things that they may not be suitably skilled to evaluate, but it's made it. Yeah, and we're getting to we're reducing the cost of creation, which leads us to like lots and lots of rubbish being generated and people not being able to evaluate it. This is where we were talking about characteristics, evaluation being one of those very strong words that if you can evaluate things and say actually that's good and that's not good, that's a good human thing to do. So there's a learning risk. There's also human risk. The human risk comes along with the side on smaller teams. So smaller teams, less interaction, less humans to talk to, less connectivity. The teams are also going to rapidly reform, because again, like long-standing teams are really useful when they are bigger, and that helps for them. And actually, you may reform your teams much quicker through this process, which then leads to a lost sense of connection, because actually I work with some people and do some things, and then I may work with some other people, but because I don't need to work with all the same people to build my human norms with them. And then you lead to this kind of human side of like the lonely human in the loop. Again, like the tiny teams at some point potentially trends to a team of one. The people talk about organizations of one and that sort of direction of kind of travel. So there is a human risk to this, about people, and because people like being with people, we're fairly social, and we like doing those sorts of things. Next one is homogeneity risk, the risk of mono anything. So because if we are getting our AI to consume our code and then code gen out of it, with obviously everything else it's consumed from the internet, what will end up doing is generating more pattern like the same pattern and more code like the same code. What that leads to is potentially faster, but actually, if you've got a systemic vulnerability that's in your code, which you've then code genned out of, you're going to end up with a monoculture problem. So in agriculture, this is seen where if you've just grown one crop again and again and again, if you have a virus or if you have a disease or something that comes through, it wipes everything out. And so there is a potential monocode challenge. There's also then that's from the code point of view, but there's also a kind of mono feature challenge where actually you keep generating things which are like the same things because that's how generative things work. And they're good at generating things which are like the same things, and therefore all your things become the same, and then everybody's things become the same, and that's just boring and rubbish. And so you need some variation in this. So humans are really good at introducing variation because we like variation and we're good at that. We just need to help people kind of do more of that. And the final one of this is about model collapse. So model collapse is the concept of the AIs consuming more data from more AIs and consuming more data from more AIs, and then everything just collapses inwards because it all becomes vanilla and rubbish. So there's a homogeneity risk. And then final one of this is a sustainability risk. So AI for AI's sake, we use AI to generate pictures of cats and things and stuff and nonsense, and we're basically using up vast amounts of energy to just use AI. And so this is a proper risk. And so working out where AI is good to use and where it's not, and where we should use it and where we shouldn't, making sure we understand the energy that it's using. Just because we can use AI doesn't mean we should, because actually we can generate other routes for dealing with this stuff. So there is a strong case around the sustainability risk on AI. So I've kind of come to the end of the hour. So as a summary for this, and then we'll get into some questions. AI teams, in our view, there is an individual convergence that's happening, which is will lead to a team convergence. Well, this leads to being driven by AI augmentation, which will accelerate time to value. So accelerating time to value sounds a bit like a strap line, but it is one of the things that we end up talking to clients about, as in go like, how do you move faster? How do you get to the thing? So AI teams is driving this in this direction. So AI convergence on individuals and teams and augmentation. Challenge with this from a transformation point of view, management systems will not keep up. So the management systems in organizations are much more static than what's happening at this change. Productivity, I've put it in quotes because everybody has a different view of what productivity will increase. But again, that's a challenge of what you measure as productivity. Sustainability is a concern because if we don't work out where best to get our energy from, or where best we use AI, don't use AI, it is a problem. Does feel uncomfortable, and the future is very uncertain because nobody here kind of knows the future. If you did, you should probably be doing some other job rather than kind of talking to me about this. But that's the direction of travel for this. But as I said, I'm an optimist. I did finish on risks and a little bit of a downer in this, but actually I think there is a huge opportunity with AI and how it's going to transform individuals and how it's going to transform teams. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. If you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, that is my LinkedIn thing. Does anyone have any questions?
Excellent. Thanks, Stuart. Great session. Right, this one just popped in there from Keith. What steps and investments are needed by companies to enable AI teams?
The investment's weird one actually. I'll come to the steps, I'll explain kind of what we're working through at the moment. Investment, the hyperscalers that we're all using for our desktop so Microsoft and Copilot, Google and Gemini, they're pushing a lot of that into their products. So on the 15th of January this year, as an example, Google made Gemini part of Google Workspace. And so the investment case is becoming a different question, because it used to, before that point, it was $20 per person per month at that point. So that the cash was required. And then about 18 months ago, MS Copilot was like $150 per person per month. And so you can see the kind of cost of this stuff coming down because the hyperscalers want us to use it because they've invested billions in these, and therefore they want us to get used to using it, and therefore then we then go back through that kind of curve of using it and it going upwards again. In terms of introduction, the way that we've tried from And Digital, we tried technology out. So we tried teaching everybody to kind of use it from a kind of specific use point of view, and that was semi-successful. So we spent like 2020, end of 23, most of 24 kind of doing that process. We're now doing that as well as desktop AI augmentation to everybody because obviously we were Google Shop and therefore we're rolling out Gemini and we're making sure that everybody uses that. The next set of those toolings though, so because if you looked at the slides previously, they all kind of either had a Copilot or a Gemini in the middle because that's generally what we see is actually is happening depending on what ecosphere you work in. The next stage on from that is then working out which tools are going to be the ones that survive the coming crush of tools. So again, we quite like Cursor, yeah, as an example. It's a good tool, yeah, it's a good product. It's also got to like if you look at the kind of graphs of like usage and adoption and stuff, it's kind of really quick and that kind of stuff. But some of these products will survive and some of the products won't. Over the next 2-3 years, there'll be a lot of consolidation through the market and products will sort of all come together again. So we're trying to make sure that there is a strategy from the company that says actually these are the things we support. We like these things are helpful, useful, but also on the negative side of it, we're saying actually these things don't use, yeah. And to the extent of and I have no problem with DeepSeek personally, but actually DeepSeek's free version was obviously just shifting information into other places you didn't want to share your organizational information or your client's information or your private information. So as an example, as an organization, we've blocked DeepSeek, yeah, because we didn't want to use that. We will try to work out some way in which we will kind of segregated model play with it, but you kind of need to provide those things. So we have this view about trying to provide 80% of the products that we need for for everybody in the company within our controlled space, and then allow a 20% space for kind of people to play with things. But if those things turn out to be nefarious, we will quite quickly block them. And I use the word nefarious intentionally because some of it does just rinse all your information and sell it to anybody that would buy it. Cool. Does that answer
Great.
the question?
Okay, so there's one from Tom. Tom's asking, can you give any numeric data for any types of AI productivity like values or quality or ROI?
So the one from the insurance example right at the start was from a kind of a field study from us. And that was where we got to kind of 20 to 25% productivity. It's a mix of numbers. So it was around throughput, cycle time, but we also applied a kind of measure of developer experience and how happy people were using it because it's not just about how many Jira tickets do you close and how many lines of code do you go through. The Microsoft and Essential one was much more the software engineering metrics. It was around kind of pull requests and times and schedules, and it was much more into kind of what was happening in GitHub. And so we've not found the perfect set of measures for it yet. We're still experimenting with them. Generally people are happy. I mean, like, but again, it's sort of productive and happy. I imagine people during the Industrial Revolution, when they got drawn into the mills, were unhappy, but productivity went up. And we're trying to work out kind of how do we kind of measure against both of those? Because if you just measure how much cloth you made in the Industrial Revolution and how not ignored how unhappy people were, then I think you do the wrong thing.
Great. Did that answer the question, Tom? This one from Alan. What do you think about the risk of over-reliance on something's covering on using AI and in some way making us lazier? Yeah, I've got those sorts of views. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So what's the term people are using now? Like vibing code, and I'm just using something to generate things. And for us, that's the classic example of people who can't evaluate the value of the thing that's in front of them. I'm just generating stuff and it will work. And does it lead to laziness, and the lack of critical thinking is the challenge. And so that's that, yes, is the answer. There is a risk, but you kind of need to you there was one of the slides we talked about pairing with AI as an augmentations position rather than relying on AI to do the thing. And it's you get the same output, but actually you've got a different outcome. So I've learned something as I've worked with it. So I've asked it how to solve the question, the thing in front of me, rather than giving me the solution for the thing in front of me. And so I think there's just a way in which we will learn to use AI that will do that. In the same way that some people have become lazy since we've had cars. Yeah. So if you look at people, they were like they will drive like half a mile to the shop rather than walk, and that's rather lazy. But I think we just kind of need to apply some of those sorts of human things to it as well.
No, I've got sort of similar views. So I guess the point is if we use AI intelligently to help us automate and do the things that as humans we're traditionally not very good at, we're trying to reduce the error rates, that's a good thing. But if it gets us to a place where we, like you were saying, we just stop applying ourselves or thinking or just generally become less capable and competent, that's a really bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, science fiction and Pixar films, yeah, like lead us down some of these lines. If you think of Wall-E, yeah, like they're
Hmm.
basically all wandering around on that spaceship around the universe, and they all get very big, yeah, and because they all get lazy and they're all doing that kind of stuff. So you end up with people going that's one of the routes that you could go down with any of this kind of stuff. But hopefully we've learned enough from our science fiction to kind of scare ourselves enough into action.
Patrick, you've got your hand up waiting there patiently.
Yeah, thanks, Seth, and thank you very much, Stuart. Really appreciate that model that you shared on assessing individuals and teams. I think that's really helpful and applicable to a lot of different teams outside of the tech space, I think. Um, and utilizing AI, obviously. And I had a question, and then some conversations happened that kind of reflected some of my thoughts. So it's trying to put a slightly different spin on it, talking about AI and what's going to happen to humans as we continue to utilize it. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the notion that Marshall McLuhan posited. It's called narcissus narcosis. And it's the idea that an excessive fascination with new technologies leads to a loss of basic skills, in addition to social costs. Stuart, which you actually touched on some in the risks section of your presentation. One example of this narcissus narcosis is the invention of the calculator, whereby folks basically no longer have the capacity to do math in their head, or maths, I think, as they say across the
Yeah.
pond. Um, and I'm just curious. You touched on a little bit, but for me, like AI might be thought of as a kind of a calculator on steroids, where an over reliance on it could lead to a lack of being able to think for oneself and do basic research and read things and critically analyze them and so forth. You touched on a little bit. I'm just curious, what, if any, kind of conversations do you and your colleagues have about this type of concern, and what, if anything, are people doing about it operationally?
There's obviously discussion we end up with clients around AI ethics, and AI ethics tends to be close. Yeah, it tends to be much closer to kind of where you are now about not doing evil things with AI and everything else along those lines. The AI social future, it tends not to be the realm of where our clients are, because they basically want faster horses, basically. And they want the thing better, quicker, yeah, all that kind of stuff. But it's really nice to have these sorts of conversations, because these are the kind of places these things come up. You meet kind of bright people who kind of question this stuff, as in like, yes, it's good, but what do we give up? Yeah, what do you lose by doing that? And so um I have a view that yes, my mental arithmetic is worse than my father's. Yeah, because he was much better at that kind of stuff, and he had a slide rule, and he did all those sorts of things, and that was interesting. However, I think actually technology, ignore it being AI or whatever else, I think technology gives us a kind of wider breadth, and the standard of living improves, I think. And again, I say I'm AI positive, but I'm also tech positive, because this is what I've done all my career. So I think we do obviously give some things up, but I think we gain more, and so therefore my position is the positive side of it. I do believe, yeah, my mental arithmetic is rubbish compared to where it used to be. So, uh, but we very rarely have that level of conversation with clients, because they're not thinking about multi-decade societal change.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point. We've got a few questions in the chat, but I see Sheila's got her hand up, so Sheila, we'll come to you, and then I'll come back and pick up the remaining questions in the chat.
Okay. I have two questions. The first is, if you're talking about really small teams with very little management oversight, and they're working directly with the users or getting the requirements directly with the users, most of the time, users are making assumptions based on whatever they currently have, no matter how inadequate it is. So if we're not going to the root cause and figuring out what the real problem is, which these small teams, I suspect, are not going to do, aren't we going to just wind up with a um, larger set of, it's the equivalent of spaghetti code in my mind. What do you do to prevent that?
So what you're saying is, like, because there isn't strategic thinking into it, and you're just asking people what they want, they get what they ask for, or
Well, it may not even be what they asked for. You may get a misinterpretation of it if you've got small teams with people who don't necessarily know that business aspect in detail. So you may get something that isn't an improvement. It may even not be usable, or it may be an improvement, but improvement based upon unnecessary constraints
yeah,
that is still very inefficient and uh, not going to withstand future changes.
okay. Um, I'm trying to think of an example, as in what when you were talking, I was thinking about adding features ad infinitum into a product, and keeping adding features even if nobody really wanted that feature, type of thing. Is it? And then it becomes over complicated. Um, and I then started to think about Microsoft Excel versus Google Sheets as an example. But I think that maybe the antidote to that is the users are the makers at some point in the medium future. And instead of asking people what they want, people are going to make what they want. What wants and needs is an interesting side of this, though, isn't it? And because again, then you've got unevaluated, unskilled, people who are not good at evaluation, generating output of code, which is your spaghetti code. Yeah, yes, yes, yes. I think this will happen.
Okay. I mean, it just seems very inefficient to me and not a sustainable model for the long run. I do think in the long run, AI is a good thing. It's just getting there that's going to be painful.
Even if you look at the efficiency of the code we write now, even if it was non-AI code compared to the code that had to be written in computers of the past, it is massively inefficient because we have more compute and we have more memory and we have everything else we need. We've already started to abstract ourselves away from it. If we're at fourth level abstraction, AI gets us to a fifth or a sixth, and then we've got AI. I think there's this interesting place in code development where instead of the AI code genning JavaScript, because that's something that we can read, it code gens binary because actually that's what's actually required for the machine to read. And at which point we're going to have an interesting problem of people trying to evaluate the output.
Yeah, I saw somebody said something in the chat about technical debt, and that I think this is just going to make it increase geometrically.
Yeah. And then at some point, someone will say, I think AI is the solution to that. And then you'll have an AI agent that goes and refactors everything, and then you get it eats itself at some point.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to move us on. That's okay. Jim, I'm going to come to you next because you've got your hand up. Then I'm going to try to get to a few of the remaining questions in the chat. Over to you.
Thank you, Sath. Stuart, thanks very much for your presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Very stimulating. So possibly just conveniently, I'm literally reading Uncle Bob's Clean Agile book. And I'm getting towards the end of it, and he opens one particular section by stating that the transition from a non-agile organization to an agile one is actually a transition of values. If there's some merit in that, from the work you've done, your experience and your insight in this, how does this and AI in general help, if at all, with that issue?
As in if it is a transfer of values, then I think actually fewer people can transfer values better and then can bind around some principles easier. So if you look at a startup of 5, 6 people, it can be a reasonably understood set of values and culture amongst those 5 or 6 people. When they get to a scale up of 500 people, it's much harder. When they're at 5,000 people, it's impossible. Yeah, you're doing culture change programs with 5,000 people, where actually those 5 people just kind of know each other. And so I think the micro team process gets to a shared value thing. Maybe it's not the organizational value, but actually be the value that Jim, you, me, and Sath can have, that we will make the thing, and we know each other well enough to do that kind of stuff together. So I think fewer people works better for that. And I think AI enables fewer people. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? I didn't mean like actual fewer people, just fewer people working together on the same thing. I think is probably what I meant to mean.
So just following up on that, you did mention at the start you were going to talk about potentially changing roles for people. And just picking up on what you said, I'm just wondering, again, coming back to what Uncle Bob was saying, that it's, in his view, I think it was the middle layer that was typically the obstacle to that agile transition. So, senior leadership were keen to adopt faster, better, smarter techniques.
Yep.
The actual technical teams were obviously keen on that as well, but it was that middle layer that was presenting the issue and presenting the obstacles. So just picking up what you said then, this kind of enables perhaps overcoming that, bypassing it. Yeah.
Less management, but also the management structures have to change as well, which is I don't think anyone's quite grasped that from a large organizational point of view yet, as in like, how does this mean in terms of this? So like you look at like Salesforce saying, actually, we're not hiring any developers anymore because we're just going to make our people do more stuff with AI. And what does that actually mean to their middle? And so I think the thing you're describing is the frozen middle, but also the kind of where fiefdoms get built, because the reason the top wants it done is just because it's sort of like it's better for the bottom line, as in like if we can move faster and do things better, then that's good. The reason the bottom kind of wants kind of agile transformation is because actually they're made, they get autonomy and they get kind of the kind of piece in that. I think we're going to end up with flatter organizations, but again, this is yet to be kind of proven out because nobody has quite gone through this stuff yet, and we're seeing it sort of trickle down from the kind of hyperscalers, but also then for how the bottom up work is going to work. I think it's going to be fascinating what happens over the next couple of years as we see this kind of pan out.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Jim. Right, I think I'm probably not going to get to all of the questions there from the chats. If I don't get to your question and you really wanted to hear Stuart's perspective, I'm sure Stuart won't mind you reaching out. Is that all right, Stuart?
Yeah, of course.
there's a
Connect
couple
on
of
LinkedIn and chat.
Yeah, there's a couple of long. So there's one here from Debbie. It's quite long, so I'm going to do my best to quickly rattle through it. And maybe you can give a very short answer, so it gives me a few minutes just to wrap up at the end. So what we got here, in your experience, what have you seen actually happen with AI use, advantages, disadvantages, e.g. has it enabled mid-level devs to generate maintainable, efficient, secure code more, oops, I've lost the question now, that was unfortunate, it just scrolled past me. Secure code more quickly or UX?
So
Yeah, it's quite a long question.
the secure code piece is interesting because if you've got security standards and you can pattern to them and get the AI to consume through them, then yes. The challenge is if it produces a monocode future vulnerability. So there's a challenge to that. In the UX and experience design space, what we're seeing is actually the cycle time of design like massively collapsing. Yeah. So instead of designs being taking like days and weeks to produce, it's actually being done in near real time. The challenge with all of that is being able to evaluate how good they are. Because just because you can produce 50 different variants of it in Figma AI in 30 seconds doesn't mean any of them are any good. You still need someone to choose which one is the right one. Because I said, like that, the evaluation is really important because we have had a societal thing where we attribute value to output. Right. And we need to kind of overcome that because our brains are tuned to that and go like, oh yes, produce the thing. And that thing used to take a week to make. Therefore, this thing, which took 30 seconds, must be as valuable as the thing that took a week to make. And it's not. And that's a challenge for our brains to overcome.
Okay, great. Right. So I'm interested in the ethical side of these things too. There's a question here from Nicholas. So yeah, I mean this one could go on a bit, but can you just share a very quick perspective on it? I mean, does the concentration on AI ethics based on opaque training data sets make people forget about data ethics?
Yes, because again we end up in just output, yeah, and so like it's so easy to do, and therefore where has it been trained from? What's it been trained on? I mean, like the general feeling is like it's the internet, but which bits, yeah, and like how much and who chose what and how does it do that and why does it do that? And so this is why a lot of the legal concern at the moment. So if you are using AI to hire or fire people, you will be at some point in trouble because you can't prove why. And so therefore there's a kind of an ethical question about AI in HR fundamental decisions. There was a speaker at the AI London group like just before Christmas who was basically saying there's a couple of cases which are going through the courts at the moment which are going to provide the proof, the case law for what we are going to have to abide by in the future. They haven't got, as far as I understand, they haven't all come to fruition yet. But yeah, the ethics of what actually happened, how did it make that decision, and why did I hire that? Why did this happen, not that happen? It's yeah, the opaqueness is a significant risk.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of that. It's gonna become quite a challenging space. Right, I'm gonna just take this one last one from Keith because I'm kind of intrigued at what you're going to say, if I'm honest. I assume regulation will be slow to respond, but eventually, do you see it can actually be regulated?
Okay, so the regulation world is different at the moment, and this gets into the geopolitics side of this. Europe is regulating and will regulate more. The UK will be that, but a bit less. The US is doing what the US is doing at the moment, and other places will be very different. Some people will get competitive advantage from that, and therefore where you use your AI, which AI you use, where you're working from, will make a difference in terms of where your geopolitics sits. And so regulation, yes. It's really interesting when you watch the kind of US response to the European regulation. Yeah, they're going, oh, that's just anti-competitive, etc., etc. But then you look at it from a European point of view, you're going like, but it's safer. Yeah, like it's like Volvo with the seat belt. Yeah, like they invented the seat belt and then they gave it as a free patent to the world and stuff. That was a good thing. Yeah, so I'm not saying the EU AI regulation is the seat belt, but in my mind, you need regulation, because if you don't, it's all the Wild West, and in the Wild West, people got shot.
I like the concept of guardrails.
Yeah.
Use some guardrails. Right, that's great, Stuart. You've admirably answered a whole ton of questions, so well done, mate. That was that really good going there. I don't think I've missed any others, but if I have missed a question in there, apologies, and please do feel encouraged to reach out to Stuart to continue the conversation online. Stuart, just to say thanks for joining us. Great to see you again, mate, and fantastic to hear your talk again, sort of from a slightly different perspective this time. Yeah, based on the engagement and interaction, I think everyone here thoroughly enjoyed it too. So thank you again kindly for giving your time and joining us for this session. And thanks to everyone for joining us too. Great to see you all. Superb participation and engagement this evening. So yeah, lovely. So just before we jump off, we do have our event in for April, and we'll be welcoming back a past guest speaker, Sheila Walsh will join us. Since we last had Sheila on, she written her book. Donald and I have got copies. I'm really enjoying reading it. It's a topic I'm really passionate about. So if you want to hear a little bit more about Sheila's perspectives on trying to build inclusive leadership cultures to support organisational development, that's a session for you. I'm sure it'll prove another popular one. Sign up for that, and then we'll get a few more added in over the coming weeks. But yep, that's us. Thank you again for joining. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we hope we see you again. So enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you happen to be, and whatever time it happens to be where you are. So thanks again, Stuart. Thanks, folks, for joining. All right, take care.
Cool. Cheers all. Thank you.
All right, Stuart.
Thanks very much. Cheers.